Right now, nearly 4,500 miles away, Matt Baker and the Wild Alaska Live team are witness to the world's biggest feast.
After months have been frozen, the arrival of summer brings a 4-month rush to feed and breed, attracting eagles, sharks, bears and wolves, all triggered by the annual arrival of Pacific salmon to this vast wilderness.
Wild Alaska Live is capturing this incredible spectacle on TV and online.
The Alaskan wilderness may seem a world away, but we are here every day this week to show you the wilder side closer to home, right here in the UK. As a wildlife cameraman, I've travelled all over the world, but the wildlife and wild landscapes of these islands hold a special place in my heart and are full of inspirational and surprising wildlife stories.
As a zoologist, I love getting out and about to the wilder parts of the UK to discover conservation projects that help keep places like this corner of the Western Highlands wild. Over this series, we're travelling from rivers to mountains, from forests to seas, and even celebrating some of our wildest cities to bring you the best our country has to offer.
The UK is a lot wilder than you may think.
This is Wild UK.
Each day this week, we'll be looking at a different wilderness in the UK.
Today, we're revealing the wildness of our forests and woodlands.
This is the Caledonian Forest, and you know, there's a real sense of wilderness here, perhaps because it's been here ever since the last ice age. But of course, it's a remnant of what was once an enormous forest that once upon a time would have covered the whole of the UK. It's made up of a mixture of Scots pine, birch and rowan, and is home to some of our rarest wildlife, such as the Scottish wildcat and capercaillie, a bird which is found nowhere else in the UK other than this unique Caledonian forest. It's also the habitat that was once home to wildlife surprisingly similar to that found in Alaska. European brown bears and grey wolves once roamed these forests.
And once upon a time, you could even find wild boar here, which is an animal that's made a dramatic recovery in some of our southern forests. And we're going to find out more about that success story later on in the programme. I'll be on the trail of the elusive pine marten here in Scotland. If we want to do a proper job and identify it, I guess we should actually have a sniff, though.
We're going to have to put it to the test.
OK.
We're joined by some familiar faces, sharing their best past experiences of the wildlife that rely on our forests and woodlands, and the conservation success stories that have helped them.
I haven't seen a red kite spectacle as good as this ever.
And Colin travels deep into the heart of Kielder Forest for some peace and quiet.
You don't have to go far into a woodland before you really feel that you've entered an entirely new world.
But first, time for a snapshot of our wild forests and woodlands.
There are over 3.1 million hectares of wild woodland across the UK. Nearly 250,000 more than covered our landscapes in 1998. Woodland now covers over a tenth of the UK's total land area. These forest areas range in size and shape from old-growth mixed deciduous forests containing species such as oak and birch through to large human-made plantations of conifers. Ancient woodlands support over 200 of our rarest and most threatened species, such as dormice. One of the things that I really love about forests is they're just great places to get away from the hustle and bustle of modern life. I mean, your mobile phone doesn't really work and you're amongst all of these ancient trees, and there's just a real sense of remoteness, even in the smallest of woodlands. Last month, Colin travelled to Kielder Forest in Northumberland, where remoteness is a virtue.
Kielder Forest is one of the largest forests in the UK, but surprisingly it is relatively new. It was established after the First World War to provide the UK with more timber. Thanks to its enormous size and remote location, it's the perfect place to escape into the wilderness.
You don't have to go far into a woodland before you really feel that you've entered an entirely new world. As soon as you let it envelop you, you somehow leave the rest of the world behind.
A whole host of creatures have made this forest their home, including roe deer, the goshawk, and the crossbill, which is adapted perfectly to the food on offer. It's also home to one of Britain's favourite animals, the red squirrel. But getting an encounter takes a bit of patience.
Red squirrels can be really difficult to see. They spend so much of their time in the treetops, but they find peanuts hard to resist. And sure enough, there's one now. Beautiful little creatures. I love their sort of little tufted ears, and it seems like he's using his tail as an umbrella today. It's such a pity that they've disappeared over so much of England. Now, as soon as grey squirrels were introduced, the red squirrel population went into dramatic decline. Grey squirrels aren't so fussy about what they eat, and they tend to get to the food first. But this is a real stronghold for the red squirrel. 50% of the English population is found in this forest.
Kielder Forest is also home to another successful tree dweller, the tawny owl. I joined Martin Davison from the Forestry Commission as he was carrying out a population study on this year's brood.
Ah, look at that.
Pop it in his bag. Just get the chick out. And here we go.
Ah, look. I love them at this stage when they've still got that little bit of down on. They look the very best, but the feathers are starting to come through.
You know, as they grow, they start to molt the down out. And as you can see, they're starting to grow in their flight feathers.
Martin, now, is he just sleeping, or is that a bit of a defence mechanism too?
Well, no, he's just having a sleep. They don't get fed during the day at all. They just basically go into sleep mode, and then all night they'll be fed. It's just reverse of our lives.
How many tawnies have you ringed this year?
Been an excellent year. We've ringed just over 200 this year.
So is that all to do with prey availability, Martin?
It is, Colin, you're quite right. The more food there is, the more eggs they lay, the more chicks I have. It's as simple as that. I would expect this chick to be doing really well because it's a lone chick and lots of food coming in, so it's going to grow very quickly and fledge, you know, around with 35 days. Just pop them back in the bag now.
Thanks to Martin and the team, tawny owls in Kielder are really thriving. The vast size and remote location of this woodland wilderness has given rise to another important scientific study, but has nothing to do with Kielder's wildlife. To discover more, I'm off to the park's very own observatory. Hayden Goodfellow is one of the astronomers here and helps to operate the observatory's giant telescope.
How are you? Ah, it is pretty impressive.
It's a very nice piece of kit.
So, Hayden, if it's not a silly question, how far can you actually see with something like this?
The furthest I've observed with this telescope is a galaxy about 42 million light years away. But some of my colleagues say they can see billions, which is pretty much all the way out to the edge of the universe.
And so why is this here? Is it just because it's so dark? Is that a big advantage?
Yeah, it's just the darkness. When you're in a city, between you and the nighttime sky, there is a huge blanket of yellow-white streetlights. By getting away from all of that light pollution, we can allow that signal from the sky to come through and we can see fainter, more distant objects.
I've heard that there are many people who live in England who have never seen a really true night sky.
95% of people in England can't go out into the back garden and see the Milky Way.
It's kind of sad, really, isn't it?
I mean, one of the first goals of the observatory when we opened, taking advantage of the dark skies, was to ensure they stayed that way. There's no point building an observatory if in 20 or 30 years' time the light pollution from Tyneside has crept up the valley and we're now surrounded by supermarkets and streetlights. We want to keep this area dark for generations to come.
Looking for wildlife in forests can often be a bit challenging because there's just so much cover. But the animals do leave clues, don't they, Colin?
Thankfully, they do.
What do you reckon about that?
I'd say that is a red squirrel.
That's
wouldn't you?
exactly what I was thinking. The teeth have gnawed away at that. This one, on the other hand, though, I think that's a crossbill.
Exactly. And once they prize them apart, they get their tongues inside and take out the little seeds. And you know, of late too, we've been able to use all sorts of new camera technologies. And I love these because it means I don't have to spend all day in the forest. But no, but you can actually attach them, say, onto a tree or something like that, and they will record pictures when you're not there. And they often record the most amazing things.
Yeah.
Badgers are an animal that are regularly recorded in many of our woodlands, especially in the south and west. Now, in the forest around Thetford in East Anglia, there is a small breeding population of a rare golden pheasant, a bird introduced from China back in the 1700s.
There's one animal that leaves very obvious marks in our forests and regularly turns up on camera traps, and that's the wild boar. Now, this is one of our long-lost beasts that would have been at home roaming around medieval forests, but was hunted to extinction. But as of 40 years ago, it's back, and Sabet Chowdhury went to the Forest of Dean to find out why.
I've been a rambler for 25 years and walked a lot of the English countryside, but for the last 10 years, Spanky, come here, I've had a little companion. Now, we've both grown up in Gloucestershire, but we've never actually been to the Forest of Dean, and what a day to come to find out about one of its largest inhabitants. Wild boar have been in the Forest of Dean for nearly 20 years. Since then, their population has increased rapidly, and some of their activities are getting them into trouble. They root up the ground, leaving their mark on the forest and surrounding areas. This has a cost to local farmers, businesses, and residents. The job of monitoring and controlling the burgeoning population falls to Ian Harvey from the Forestry Commission.
OK, what we've got here, Sab, is typical of the wallows that the boars create. They'll rub in there. Obviously, the wet mud will get on the coats. Any parasites, ticks, insects, things like that, blood-sucking insects will attach to the mud. Then they rub on the posts, as you can see. They'll also rub on surrounding trees as well. Same sort of thing. There's certainly boar in the area, as all the evidence is suggesting.
What happens if you come across one yourself? I mean, what's the safest practice?
Simple answer, really, Sab, is to give them some space. If you've got a dog, keep it under control on a lead if it's not very well trained. Avoid areas of very thick vegetation if you can. You know, stick to the main sort of tracks, because again, that's one of the problems, particularly as the year goes on and all the vegetation grows up. It's hard to see the animals.
Is the forest big enough to keep an unchecked breeding population?
You've got 12,000 hectares of perfect habitat for them. Nice climate, favourable conditions. They're thriving. Left unchecked, the only sort of major cause of mortality would be road traffic accidents. They would increase. It's a factor of their population that the numbers can increase very, very quickly. Without any natural predators, there is no real alternative but to limit the population growth by culling.
As the population increases, the wild boar are coming into contact with people more and more. Would you believe it? Along this busy road, we've just spotted an entire family of wild boar. There's the mother, the sow. Now, she's got 5 or 6 little humbugs with her. This is incredible. They've brought the entire busy road to a standstill. I've never actually seen a wild boar before, and now I'm watching an entire family cross the road. This is utterly amazing. But what do the locals and visitors make of this recent addition to the forest? What do you guys make of the wild boar here?
I mean, it'd be nice to see them.
I think I like to see them, but I think there are too many of them.
They're part of the ecosystem now, and they do a lot for it, turning over the earth.
You go to some areas and it's completely dug up. It looks like it's a war zone almost.
Culls are always a difficult thing. I mean, obviously, personally for me, I don't think it's necessary.
We have culls on squirrels or the deer, so why not the boar?
We introduce the wolf and that'll keep them down.
So the wolf is your way to keep them in?
Yeah.
As Gary says, if the wolf or something else was there, there'd be a balance, but there isn't a balance.
Whilst not overly aggressive, boar can react to dogs, the closest thing to a predator in these woods.
Are you scared of them?
I am sometimes if I've got the dogs with me.
So you still get excited when you see them?
Oh, God, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've been trying to find them today, but, you know, they're one of those mythical things that are out there somewhere. But, you know, if we bump into them, then, yeah, great, it'd be amazing.
So after a 300-year absence from our forests, the wild boar are back. And while they're not problem-free, they are here to stay.
Now, I think it's great that such a substantial mammal has found its home in our forests once again, because once they were an integral part of our woodlands, and in fact they're very beneficial for them.
But small animals can make a big impact as well. I mean, just take this Scots pine here. You can see it's riddled with holes. And you can see here what's made them. This is a tiger beetle here, and this soft wood of the Scots pine is favoured by its grubs. And these very neat round holes are where the grubs have made their way out naturally. But these more jagged holes here are where woodpeckers have pecked away to have the grubs for dinner.
And something bigger has been in search of them too. As that looks to me, maybe, what do you reckon? Badgers, pine martens or something?
Could be either, couldn't it? So knowing where to look is really key if you want to sort of unravel the mysteries that the forest has to offer. And in 2014, the One Show's George McGavin travelled to Devon for a surprise encounter with a very special animal.
Dartmoor National Park, home to some of the wildest and bleakest country in southern England. It's most famous for rugged moorland, but its wooded valleys are home to one of Britain's rarer and lesser-known creatures. I've only seen the blue ground beetle as a pinned specimen or a picture in books. It's so rare, it was once considered extinct in the UK. Without inside information, they're almost impossible to find. So I'm meeting expert John Walters, who's been studying the blue ground beetle for almost 20 years.
It's Britain's biggest ground beetle. It's quite a monster. It's very rare, just found in a handful of sites, maybe 10 sites along the southern edges of Dartmoor and Bodmin.
Now this ancient woodland is prime habitat, isn't it?
It likes warm places, but they also need to be damp and moist as well. So in this valley, the lovely south-facing valley side here is nice and warm, whereas the north-facing side over there is a bit colder, and they don't like that so much.
The beetles are restricted to rare ancient woodlands like this, rich in deadwood and moss where they like to hide. Once darkness falls, they emerge to hunt, so we settle in to wait for dusk. The common name ground beetle sort of implies that you find them on the ground. That's not actually true, is it?
Not with this one. This is an unusual type of ground beetle which lives up trees. I mean, it hunts for tree slugs.
And that's what it's after.
This is one of the world's biggest slugs, the ash black slug, and this is quite a small one actually. This thing can grow up to 20, 30 centimetres long.
I have to say there's always for me a really special thrill when I know there's a very good chance that I'm just about to see something that I have never seen before. As night falls and the slugs start to emerge from their hiding places, we begin our search. And remarkably quickly, we have success.
Oh, this one.
What? Where?
Here we go.
Where?
Blue ground beetle. Look at that.
It is very blue, isn't it?
It's a beauty. It's shimmering in the torchlight, isn't it?
It is absolutely gorgeous.
This one's a male, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah?
I'll pick him up.
How do you tell?
Well, the main features are, get your torch on that, but if you look closely at the front legs, you can see just at the end, there's got a series of pads.
Yeah.
Quite broad, and they're used for the male while he's gripping hold of the female while mating.
That is an amazing colour.
The males are much brighter than the females as well.
What I'd love to see now is it actually eating a slug. After a bit more hunting, we find something that's not quite what we were looking for, but it is an incredibly rare thing to see.
Oh, wow. A mating pair.
Oh, it's two!
Now, I've seen maybe 800 of these beetles, but I've only seen them mating a handful of times. And the male's a slimline creature, and he's mounted on top of her using those pads I showed you earlier.
Now, the female is considerably broader than the male.
She's obviously full of eggs.
What an evening for me. That's the first time I've seen that species ever, and I've found a mating pair. We carry on looking and find plenty more beetles. But after hours of searching, we don't manage to spot one hunting. Luckily, our cameraman was out with John last night and got some unique footage.
We managed to see this. Look
Oh.
at that. Fantastic.
This
The
is
one.
amazing.
As soon as the beetles grabbed it, it's really got no chance. Squeezing it out, isn't it? Like squeezing a tube of toothpaste.
This is unbelievable film.
And you can see the way the palps are just sort of
Yeah.
around the slug.
It's gory, but yet it's fascinating.
Oh, it is
It just
amazing.
draws you in. You can't take your eyes off it. Ah, well, it's a shame I couldn't see that firsthand, but
Here it
this is just as good. So few people get to see these secretive beetles that for me it's been a real privilege to find them and film them in action in their natural habitat for the first time.
What a great little animal that was. And you know, I often find that the smaller the animal, the more interesting lifestyle it has.
Absolutely, and such surprising woodlands. I mean, the river valleys of Dartmoor are not normally somewhere you associate with trees. It's more heathland that you think of, and yet that is one of the last strongholds of that beetle.
Our woodlands are in fact home to probably the greatest diversity of species in any landscape in the UK. In fact, over 200 of our rarest animals depend on forests and woodlands for their survival. But there's one that's particularly synonymous with woodlands that almost disappeared in the 1900s. But now, with a little help, it's making a comeback. And Lucy was lucky enough to go in search of the elusive creature in Strathire.
If you want to find a pine marten, the clue is in the name. This tree-loving mammal was once our second most common carnivore, and its range stretched right across the UK. However, during the 18th and 19th centuries, deforestation and persecution caused their numbers to plummet. And by 1915, the pine marten was confined to our most remote landscapes.
Luckily, in 1988, the pine marten was thrown a lifeline and given full legal protection. Since then, the numbers have been on the rise, and I've been told that woodland like this, just east of Loch Lomond, is a great place to go pine marten spotting.
Lizzie Cruz has been studying the pine marten for 7 years.
So what makes an environment like this good for pine martens?
Pine martens are a woodland specialist, so they're really well adapted to living in woodland. They're really reliant on woodland cover for finding shelter and raising their young, avoiding predators and also finding food.
And how can you tell if there are pine martens about? Are they easy to find?
So we can look for their scats or droppings, which they leave on forest tracks.
So is that what we're going to do today? Go and search out some pine marten scat?
Yeah, let's go and have a look.
And it didn't take us long to find our first potential poo.
So here's a scat, Lizzie. What do you think that is?
Yeah, so I actually think this is a fox scat.
How can we tell?
So the main way to tell is fox scats are very disgusting and smelly.
Oh, great. If we want to do a proper job and identify it, I guess we should actually have a sniff, though.
We're going to have to put it to the test.
OK. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not nice, is it?
We'll just leave that.
Yeah. How does it contrast with the pine marten poo?
So pine marten scat is very sweet smelling and just not unpleasant at all.
With that in mind, we continued our search for the pine marten poo and soon found what we were looking for.
Gosh, there's a lot here, isn't there?
Yeah, so where you get a lot of marten scats together, it's often the sign of a territory boundary. So you'd have different martens marking their territory and saying, hey, this is mine, I live here.
So how can you tell that this is a pine marten scat?
Yeah,
then?
so if you look at this one, it's got a characteristic twisty appearance, which is what you tend to get with pine martens. It's very dark in colour. You can also tell by the smell.
OK.
So
should we dive in?
Let's do it.
The joy of my job. OK. What am I smelling for?
Well, you might get a sweet smell. Some people say they smell like Parma violets.
Really?
Or sometimes you might get like a kind of fishy undertone as well.
So sorry.
Does it smell really bad?
There was a fishy undertone I got.
Oh, okay,
there were no Parma violets in that.
I'm not
Parma
convinced
violets.
by the Parma
No,
violets.
I don't think so.
So we can actually tell a lot from scats. So we can get the DNA analysed, and you can actually get an individual fingerprint from each scat, which will tell you which individual pine marten left that scat. And if you do that throughout a whole forest, then you can estimate how many pine martens are in that particular forest.
In 2015, Lizzie and her colleagues started an ambitious project to help the pine marten spread the range further.
So we have been translocating pine martens from forests in Scotland, where they're doing really well, to sites in mid Wales where the pine marten population was almost extinct. And over 2 years, we've translocated 39 pine martens, and the population is doing really, really well.
Fantastic.
All of the reintroduced martens have been released into the Ceredigion Valley, with the final release due to take place later this year. The project has proved to be a resounding success, with tracking data showing that each released marten has set up its own home territory close to the original release site. And a few months ago, one of the project's remote cameras recorded some incredibly special footage.
So this family here, it's a female with 3 kits. They were born probably March this year. This female was translocated in 2015, and this is the first family that have been conceived in Wales. So these are Welsh kits that have been born and bred in Wales. So we now have a self-sustaining, healthy pine marten population in Wales for the first time in probably over 100 years.
Oh, congratulations, that's fantastic news. Yeah. You must be very proud.
Yeah.
And the next stage, of course, would be to introduce the pine marten to England.
You know, I remember once upon a time they were incredibly rare in Ireland, and when I was a kid I had a little book and I can see the photo of them now, and I thought that would be brilliant to see them one day. Never thinking I would, but they're actually very common now. And they're such charismatic little creatures.
Yeah, I was pretty gutted not to see one, but it just gives me an excuse to get out there and try another time. And that's what we want to do here at Wild UK, is encourage you to go out and explore. And it's not hard to find a patch of woodland, but if you need a little bit of extra inspiration, here's our guide to where the wild things are.
In the autumn, our deciduous woodlands burst into colour to deliver one of nature's most spectacular displays. This phenomenon can be witnessed wherever you are in the UK, but there are a few hidden gems in Northern Ireland's ancient forests. If you look carefully, you might see some of our special butterflies, such as the pearl-bordered fritillary. It can be found as early as April in the deciduous forests of Scotland and southern England. We have 3 species of woodpecker: the greater, the lesser spotted, and the green. The green woodpecker is the biggest and can be found across most of England, Wales and Scotland. It's often heard before it's seen and uses its long tongue to tuck into its favourite snack, ants. The dormouse is one of our nocturnal favourites and leaves its own unique mark in the hazelnuts it nibbles. While you're unlikely to see one in the wild, you've got a good chance of discovering its evidence trails in forests across southern England and Wales.
One of the great pleasures for me of exploring wild places is taking photos of them. So I always try and make sure that I've got a camera or at least a mobile phone. And it seems that you guys do too, because you've sent some fantastic images of woodlands through using the hashtag #MyWilderness.
Like this frosty view of Thetford Forest in Norfolk, and this of bluebells carpeting the Forest of Dean in Gloucestershire.
Please do keep sharing your wild experiences online at the hashtag #MyWilderness. Now, the wilderness of Alaska is being revealed all this week, both online and on BBC One, by the Wild Alaska Live crew. Over the last few months, their crews have been travelling far and wide to capture the incredible wildlife that lives there. In June, one of the teams was on a mission to capture the lives of brown bears, but things didn't get off to the start they'd hoped.
The bear crew had planned to film in the very remote location of Katmai National Park in Alaska to capture the lives of the brown bears just before the start of the salmon run. But all good plans can be derailed by the Alaskan weather, as director Charlie Bingham and wildlife cameraman Ian Llewellyn know too well.
We allowed 4.5, 5 days. Because of the weather closing in, that has been reduced to what will now be, well, once we get that, well, 2.5 absolute max. So it's going to be a real challenge, going to work around the clock. One good thing, it basically doesn't get any darker than this.
At this time of the year, I don't think it's going to be particularly difficult to find the bears, but we are pushing it in terms of getting a really beautiful sequence.
Right, let's go.
Don't forget my bag's in the front seat.
Yeah.
With the weather window finally open for them, the crew were keen to get to location. It's a 90-minute flight from Homer across some of the most remote wilderness Alaska has to offer. And at the end, there isn't even a runway. The landing strip is the beach.
Made it. What a journey in. Done a lot of plane journeys, but I don't think I've ever done one as beautiful as that. That was spectacular. And it's amazing to finally get here. I'm really happy, very, very happy. Let's film some bears.
Time is of the essence, but before the crews can head out to find the bears with expert guide Samira, they're given advice on how to behave around these large and potentially dangerous animals.
All right, sitting is a very non-threatening body language. That's why as soon as we get to an area, we sit down immediately and we let them see us doing that. And you will see that activity as well. If there's a bear in the meadow and another bear comes in, you will see the bear that's already in the meadow sit down, and then the other one will sit down, because they're showing each other that both of them want to be non-confrontational. They just want to share the meadow together. Standing is more of a threatening body language. So you want to keep the bears as comfortable as possible.
There are no vehicles in this part of the park, so to get anywhere it's all on foot. And the crew need to take all their equipment with them. So travelling light isn't easy, as cameraman Mark Sharman is discovering.
It's a very heavy setup. Not perfect for trekking for a 45-minute journey, that's for sure. I probably regret having such a large tripod.
Their trek takes them through the woodlands and finally to a meadow where the bears are regularly found. But not today. And it's not until the crew are heading back to camp that they get their first encounter with a large male grizzly.
He's not wanting us any closer. He's cowboy walking. He's being very territorial right now, so we're not going to get any closer.
It's a start, but it's just one shot. They need more, and they've got just one more day to get it. Thankfully, day 2 begins much more positively.
Because after all this waiting, it looks like we've got Mum and 3 cubs on the tidal flats. But this could be exactly what we've been waiting for.
They move into position. The family of bears are hunting for clams, which live just under the surface of the beach.
You'll see the mom swinging her head back and forth as she's walking across the tidal flats. The clams underneath can feel the pressure of her footprints, and when it moves all of a sudden, it shoots out a little shoot of water that comes up. As soon as she sees one of those, she starts digging.
Hey there. Hey there.
I've filmed grizzlies quite a few times now, but that was a really special little moment. You could actually see them digging the clams out and very delicately opening them up and extracting that very nutritious meal inside. So that was a fantastic spectacle. And they came right past us with the mountains in the background. That's up there with the best things.
Yeah! As the weather cools down, the bears move off the beach and into the meadow, and the crew follow. They need to make the most of their last filming day, and there's one bear that is giving the crew all the close-ups they could ever wish for.
be this close to a grizzly bear. That was awesome.
Wild Alaska Live will have more about those bears on Wednesday night, BBC One, 8 p.m.
Now, many of our birds rely on woodlands and trees for building their nests and for roosting. And I remember the first job I ever had as a wildlife cameraman was to go and film one particular nest. And the exact location had to be kept a secret because the bird at that time was in danger of extinction. That was the red kite. And it only seems like yesterday.
And now, of course, they're the stars of Springwatch. These large birds of prey build pretty untidy nests and have been known to build on top of abandoned crow's nests or squirrel drays. Their nests are often lined with sheep's wool and found usually on tall trees on the edge of woodlands and forests, which allow the large-winged parents an easy flight path back to the nest after searching for food in the surrounding countryside. A couple of years ago, the naturalist Mike Dilger headed to the Chilterns, which is one of the birthplaces of this wild success story.
For the last 25 years, farmers in the Chilterns have been welcoming a new visitor to their fields, a former city bird, the red kite.
This species was almost extinct in England towards the end of the 19th century. And then just a handful of birds were released here into the Chilterns in the late 1980s. Now with over 1,000 breeding pairs in just this area alone, it's safe to say the red kite has made a storming comeback.
I've come to Little Horsenden Farm to meet owner and farmer Neil McIntosh, who has a special relationship with the red kite.
On my drive over here this morning, Neil, I saw a lot of red kites, but I'd imagine growing up here, you never saw them as a child.
No, we didn't see them here at all.
Since their reintroduction 25 years ago, feeding stations have driven the kites to record levels. But these birds are naturally opportunistic scavengers. And as farmland covers over 2/3 of the Chilterns, 216 square miles devoted purely to agriculture, the kites have seized on an opportunity which presents itself as farmers sow the seeds of spring.
Well, you would have thought that wildlife would stay well clear of a huge, hulking beast like this tractor, but hopefully this camera should prove otherwise.
Now the tractor's rigged up with cameras, it's time to get ploughing. I just hope the kites are ready for their close-up.
So it might take the red kites a while to see the tractor, see them ploughing, or do you think they know you're about to start ploughing?
No, that won't take them very long, not normally.
I can see them actually gathering. They obviously know that feeding time's coming.
They're looking hungry, they're just waiting for it.
Wow, two behind the tractor.
Yeah, they're coming in already.
Look at that, fabulous. I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the air. Yep. What's the maximum number you've seen coming in?
I've seen between 40 and 50 behind me at one time.
Really?
Yeah.
The kites are coming down to feed on worms, beetles and other invertebrates that Neil's plough unearths as it churns up the soil beneath us. Kites are diverse hunters, and although capable of spotting food from high in the sky, it's their exceptional ability to surf the air currents close to the ground that allows them to brave the blades of Neil's plough.
You get a real chance to see their lovely plumage as well. You don't often get this close.
No.
Lovely kind of powder grey hair, that gorgeous red tail. On the coverts on the top of the wings, that lovely kind of fawn band. Look at that ahead of us. They're just flying ahead of the tractor. Oh, what? That's absolutely amazing. That is such a brilliant sight.
Weighing in at just over a kilogram and suspended on wings of almost 2 meters, the red kite is a masterful flyer. If necessary, they can remain stock still in mid-air, with only their tail twisting in relation to airflow, just like a rudder.
I love the way when they just want to come down, they just fold their wings in, stall, and then just spiral out of the air. Beautiful. Look how close they are.
This farm has been passed down through 3 generations, but Neil will be the first of his family to have had the company of kites in these fields throughout his career.
I don't think there's many spectacles I've not seen wildlife-wise. I constantly think I've pretty much seen everything to be seen in Britain.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen a red kite spectacle as good as this ever.
Red kites are now found right across the UK, not just in Wales and the Chilterns, but also in Yorkshire and North East England.
And for their continued success, they're going to need areas of open countryside as well as forests in order to build their nests.
Tomorrow on Wild UK, we turn our attention to seas and the wildlife that make the waters around our islands their home.
Colin travels to the Farne Islands for a seabird spectacular.
I'm sorry, we're just passing through. Lucy finds out more about the project that brought back the spectacular white-tailed sea eagle to the UK.
And we set sail with the Wild Alaska team on the trail of the orca.
You can keep up with the latest news from the Wild Alaska team online all this week.
And of course, join us again tomorrow, 9:15, BBC One for more Wild UK.
And watch the Wild Alaska live show tomorrow night at 8 here on BBC One with bears, eagles, wolves and whales. A quick taster coming up.